What is up? Welcome in to yet another edition of the Ben Garcia Show. This is Benstant Reaction, instant reaction to the biggest games, the biggest trades, the biggest breaking news in sports. Super Bowl 58 has just concluded. The Chiefs have beaten the Niners, and now we have a Super Bowl champion back-to-back for the first time since, I believe, the New England Patriots. Let's get into all of it. Brock Purdy, Patrick Mahomes, Kyle Shanahan, Andy Reid, Travis Kelce. Let's get my instant reaction to the game at hand right now. So before we get into my opinions about the game, overall, players, Andy Reid, whichever superstar you want to talk about in the field, the first thing I want to talk about is the game at hand. The game as a whole was like a really bad movie, but with a really good ending. The first three quarters of this game was not fun. It was not a gunfight. It wasn't complete touchdowns over and over and over and over again. It wasn't an offensive juggernaut like we saw last year. It was kind of hard to watch. It was like a bar fight. It was just a movie that was really bad for three quarters of it, and at the very end delivered with a huge bang. It was a ton of fun towards the end. You didn't know it was going to win. You were on the edge of your seat regardless who you were rooting for. I didn't have a rooting interest in this game in terms of a fandom. Of course, I'm always rooting for players, rooting for stories, but in terms of fandom, didn't really have a horse in the fight. But here's what I'll talk about right away. Overall, the game as a whole, just kind of mid. It reminded me a lot of the halftime show, which the first 6 minutes of the halftime show, which is like three quarters in a halftime show sense, was kind of lame, kind of boring, lacked a lot of the star power, firepower that we were promised in this game. And then the last 5 minutes of the halftime show with Usher was awesome. And just like the last 15 minutes of this game was awesome. But my first thought immediately was put a bunch of players around a quarterback that is limited in some areas, not one of the best quarterbacks in the league. Brock Purdy is obviously better than Jimmy Garoppolo, what they used to have. He's probably a top 10 quarterback in the NFL, but loading up around your quarterback that has some deficiencies, as you can tell, Brock Purdy in the playoffs was just okay. He had some really good drives. He showed up in the limelight in both of the divisional and the conference championship game, was pretty much managed the Super Bowl, didn't have a ton of explosive plays, made a few pretty good throws that made your eyes kind of pop out of their sockets for a couple of plays in this Super Bowl. But overall, Brock Purdy in the playoffs was 65 for 108, 60% completion percentage, 774 passing yards, 3 touchdowns, and 1 interception. So not eye-popping numbers at all, to say the least, for Brock Purdy. But if the 49ers won this Super Bowl, the take I was going to go with was, I wonder if more teams are going to go the pay your quarterback no money, get a quarterback into the 8 to 12 range of rankings in quarterbacks, and then just put a bunch of people around him. Just put a juggernaut of a team around him. Brandon Ayuk, Deebo Samuel, Trent Williams, Christian McCaffrey, Kyle Shanahan, a ton of defensive stars on the back end, and just hope he makes enough plays to win you a Super Bowl. That's the take I was going to go with. The take I'm going with now for the San Francisco 49ers is you're not going to move off of Brock Purdy. He's too good and works too well in the Kyle Shanahan system to move off of a guy like Brock Purdy. He reminds me a ton of Kirk Cousins. Moves pretty well in the pocket, little bit of an undersized guy, doesn't have the best arm, but makes precise reads and runs the Kyle Shanahan offense like Jimmy Garoppolo could never do, like Trey Lance could never do. He's a perfect Kyle Shanahan guy. When people say, well, what if Kyle Shanahan can go after Kirk Cousins? He already has Kirk Cousins, and they don't pay him any money, and he's 10 years younger. So you're not moving off of Brock Purdy. But trying to win a Super Bowl by just not paying your quarterback anything, who's obviously limited and has some deficiencies, and just putting the Avengers around him just doesn't work. The 49ers have done it multiple times, and each time they have ran into a quarterback that is just better than them, or better than the quarterback that they have, and has crumbled and has lost. So although this game is not on Brock Purdy, and we'll get to that in a minute. The game plan of we're just going to load up our offense with a quarterback that has some deficiencies and is not one of the top 5, top 6, top 7 premier quarterbacks in the NFL, it just doesn't work to win a Super Bowl. It clearly has a shelf life. We've seen it with Jimmy Garoppolo, and now we've seen it with Brock Purdy, who's still better than Jimmy Garoppolo, but Brock Purdy is closer to Jimmy Garoppolo than he is to Patrick Mahomes. And that's always been my argument. Brock Purdy is closer to Jimmy Garoppolo than he is to Patrick Mahomes. Patrick Mahomes is an unworldly talent. He has had, over the past 2 years, his receivers are Juju Smith-Schuster, Justin Watson, Kadarius Toney, Sky Moore, Mecole Hardman, and he just wins Super Bowls with them. It doesn't matter who he has. So overall, the just load your offense up and pay the quarterback nothing unless you have a Patrick Mahomes talent and he's just on his rookie deal, it just doesn't work to win Super Bowls. It clearly has a shelf life. Now, with that being said, this game was clearly not on Brock Purdy. I know people like myself who have been highly critical of Brock Purdy because of his play on the field and given the fact that he wasn't great this playoff run, although he showed up in the limelight a few times. This game was not on Brock Purdy. And this playoff run, that was kind of disappointing given the way that they were winning when they should have steamrolled through teams, was not on Brock Purdy. Kyle Shanahan has now blown 3 double-digit leads in the Super Bowl and has lost all of them. 0-3. As the OC of the Atlanta Falcons, he lost that Super Bowl when they were up 28-3. They lost the Super Bowl where they were up 20-10 on the Chiefs. And now they've lost the Super Bowl where they were up 10-0 on the Chiefs. Kyle Shanahan, when he is up, just abandons what he wants to do. He gets cute with it. He abandons the run with Christian McCaffrey in the backfield, and it just makes no sense. Kyle Shanahan is an elite tier coach. This is not just a pile-on Kyle Shanahan video. But now we have a constant track record of a guy that kind of chokes when it matters most. Some of the play calls were just mind-boggling, completely phasing out Christian McCaffrey. In overtime, they started their first drive if they weren't bailed out by a bogus holding call by throwing the ball 3 straight times in overtime. It just made no sense. Instead of leaning on your stars, like Christian McCaffrey, like Deebo Samuel, like Brandon Ayuk, he stayed with a different playbook that was working the entire season. Kyle Shanahan deserves a ton of blame for yet another Super Bowl loss. He doesn't deserve to lose his job. He's not a bad head coach. But when he is winning in the Super Bowl, we now have a track record of when he's winning by double-digit points, he kind of vomits all over himself. When he has a clear advantage in the Super Bowl, it's like he doesn't know what to do. It's like he hasn't been there before. It's like the regular season didn't happen. You can't blow 3 double-digit leads in the Super Bowl and not have people like me question the coach at hand. And then finally, Patrick Mahomes and the Kansas City Chiefs are just Thanos. They are inevitable. It doesn't matter what happens at week 9, week 10, week 11, whenever it was on Monday Night Football that they lost to the Eagles that were spiraling. We all thought it was the end of the Chiefs. We all thought they needed more on the offensive end. Receivers weren't catching the ball. Marquez Valdes-Scantling was having problems just catching the ball. Kadarius Toney having problems catching the ball. It doesn't matter what it was. They were having clear issues on the Kansas City Chiefs offensive side of the ball. The defense was always really good, but it just doesn't matter. And now we have a conversation about Patrick Mahomes that I said we were going to have on Saturday. Is Patrick Mahomes the greatest quarterback of all time? Because people are going to point to the defense and say how great the defense was, and it absolutely was. But 34 for 46, 333 yards, 2 touchdowns, 1 pick, 1 egregious pick. But outside of that pick was just nails all postseason long. If the odds come out tomorrow for the Kansas City Chiefs and for the rest of the NFL on who will win Super Bowl 59, and the Chiefs aren't favored, just put money on the Chiefs. Because what they are doing with Andy Reid, with Travis Kelce, with Patrick Mahomes, just stacking rings, is very similar to the New England Patriots dynasty and Tom Brady. And at this point, Patrick Mahomes has 3 Super Bowl rings. He's 28 years old. No signs of slowing down. If there's anyone that's going to challenge Tom Brady or has already challenged Tom Brady for the greatest of all time, it's Patrick Mahomes. And at this point in his career, if we just line up the 3 rings and the 3 rings, Patrick Mahomes has got him beat in stats. And in the first 2 Super Bowls for the Kansas City Chiefs, he didn't have an elite tier defense like Tom Brady had for the first 3 Super Bowls. Tom Brady, not necessarily a game manager, but not necessarily an elite player in those first 3 Super Bowls, stands out with Patrick Mahomes in his first 3 Super Bowls being an elite MVP type of player. It's very similar to LeBron James in the NBA, where when LeBron James doesn't win the MVP anymore just because he's amazing, he's in a different tier on his own. And that's what's happening with Patrick Mahomes. I mentioned in week 8, week 7, when the Chiefs were spiraling, and I said Patrick Mahomes is the MVP. I got nothing but hate in my comment section because people were blaming Patrick Mahomes, whose team led the league in drops, for his receivers dropping the football. Patrick Mahomes was a life preserver for that team. And now at this point, after they got it all together and brought it all in, Patrick Mahomes led this team to a Super Bowl. Sure, the defense played great. But in overtime, after the defense had already given up 3 points, and you had to go score a touchdown because, let's be honest, a Kyle Shanahan-led offense, if they only got 3 points, they were going to lose the Super Bowl because the 49ers were just going to go down and score and win the Super Bowl. Patrick Mahomes went down, ice in his veins, won the football game, in poetic justice, won the Super Bowl by throwing to the guy in Mecole Hardman, who they got rid of last year and brought in at the deadline. If there's anyone that rivals Tom Brady's GOAT status, it's already Patrick Mahomes. And it's incredibly impressive. And the Kansas City Chiefs should be the betting favorites to win the Super Bowl next year. Because the Baltimore Ravens had a top 6 quarterback and an elite defense, and they beat them. And then they played the San Francisco 49ers that everyone was telling me had a top 5 quarterback and a very star-studded, talented offense and defense, and he beat them. He beat both number 1 seeds. Josh Allen, who was my MVP for the longest time this year, beat him. Beat Tua Tagovailoa. I mean, you look at the NFC side. Brock Purdy beat Jordan Love, Jared Goff. Patrick Mahomes beat Tua Tagovailoa, beat Lamar Jackson, and beat Josh Allen. And then went in and beat everyone and America's sweetheart in Brock Purdy. Patrick Mahomes is the greatest quarterback I've ever seen with my eyes. I understand he doesn't have the accolades yet, and I understand Tom Brady's the most productive quarterback of all time. But Patrick Mahomes is the greatest quarterback I've ever seen. Good for the Kansas City Chiefs. Good for them winning Super Bowl 58. And I'm excited to see that if they bring out Taylor Swift for the parade, because I think it's just fun when people get upset because an artist or a musician is showing up on the television screen. I think it's great for football. I think it's great when stars win, superstars win. Patrick Mahomes, clearly the face of the NFL, taking that torch from Tom Brady. And the biggest question I have is, I wonder if Andy Reid retires. I wonder, and quick side tangent here, I wonder after winning the Super Bowl, getting his 3rd Super Bowl ring, getting his 3rd title, if Andy Reid just decides, I think I want to go out on top. Jim Harbaugh's on the Chargers. Sean Payton is on the Broncos. 2 elite head coaches to a lot of people in the NFL spaces. I wonder, after winning his 3rd Super Bowl, after being a much older head coach, just decides to go out on top, just decides to show everyone that he is one of the best coaches of all time, because in my opinion, he's already surpassed Bill Belichick. I wonder if he looks at the landscape of the AFC West and just decides, I don't want to duke it out with Jim Harbaugh and Sean Payton again. I'd rather go out on top. But also I could see him saying, I've got Patrick Mahomes. Bring us with your best shot that you got. Good for the city of Kansas City, good for the Kansas City Chiefs organization, and good for the greatest quarterback I've ever seen, Patrick Mahomes.